A very good afternoon to everybody from this country and our friends from America and everywhere else in the world. Yeah, numbers have gone up. Good, thank you. This continues our what I think is a great variety of subjects in this Zoom series. James is well known to all of you. And we're going to hear about Welsh postal history, but I think in English. That would have been an interesting challenge, and we didn't do it in the rehearsal. So I'm assuming you're going to stick to that, James. This invitation came about as a result of James visiting my local Harrogate Philatelic Society, and I thought he had some lovely material. So, James, over to you.
Right, good afternoon, Mr. Vice President, fellows, members and guests. I'd like to thank Vice President Mike Roberts for inviting me to give this Zoom presentation today on Welsh postal history. I first started collecting Welsh pre-stamp postal history in 2017 when I found it was getting increasingly difficult to add to my collection of Cayman Islands. So a little plan of what I'm intending to show you today. To give you some idea, as Mark said, I'll be showing all the counties in various formats. Now, this is the item that drew me to deciding to collect Welsh postal history. I noticed a few Abergavenny items on an internet auction site and bought them. This item has an average strike of the Abergavenny box to 172 mileage mark for the distance to London via Usk, Newport and Bristol. Mail could also be sent via Gloucester, for which the mileage was 154, and these mileage marks are from the town to London. Newport in Monmouthshire used a two-line strike when Monmouthshire abbreviated to an M. You'll notice that in the lower entire, the RT of Newport is missing. This is recorded as being broken off by the 27th of December, 1787. It is interesting to note that it was not repaired and the strike was replaced in 1792. This letter was carried from Liverpool to Red Wharf by Captain Hughes. He was the master of the sloop Molly, and it thus evaded postage. And the captain was probably paid 1p for his illegal service. Uniform penny postage was established on the 10th of January 1840, which meant that all inland letters not exceeding half an ounce in weight could be sent for 1p if paid when posted. Until the 6th of May, when the first adhesives were ready for sale to the public, letters had to be marked to indicate that postage had been prepaid. The usual way was for postmaster to write a large figure 1 in red across the front, but a locally made hand stamp was in use at Beaumaris. In Brecon, the postmaster used a fancy device with his initial L for Longfellow inside a double circle. This shows the Brecon penny post used 2 years earlier than recorded in Wilcox. In 1765, any town or city was allowed to set up a penny post. This in effect allowed postage at 1p for up to 15 miles from the post office. And I have to say that at this point, I found that the book Rates to Reform by Rex Clark very useful for getting postal rates from 1812 to 1840. The Bangor 252 mileage mark was only used in 1788. This entire was addressed locally to Plasgwyn, which is just over 10 miles along the Menai Strait towards Carnarvon. As this was within one post stage, i.e. 15 miles, it must have been a double rate, i.e. 2 sheets of paper. This entire was sent from receiving house number 1 at Llangefni with Bangor penny post box strike in red. The 1 has been crossed through and it has been sent free to the Chelsea Hospital. It shows the inspector's free franc hand stamp. The TP rate 2 mark is the charge for forwarding from the London main post office to Chelsea Hospital, as the district post charge was payable. An entire charge 4pence for the distance above 80 miles. The 2-line Llandovery strike is used within the first known year for this. The use on this entire of the Llandovery 194 mileage mark is 2 years earlier than recorded by Wilcox, and the earliest example currently recorded. In England and Wales around 1784, the post office introduced mileage marks to assist the post office clerks in calculating rates. Unfortunately, many of these were inaccurate and were revised with new hand stamps issued in 1801. This is the first Aberystwyth mark. The original rate of 5pence has been crossed through and the entire was re-rated at 10pence. This is the double rate for 30 to 60 miles. This shows an entire from Lampeter with the box 211 mileage mark for the distance to London. Adding the distance from London to Weymouth of 127 miles results in the 11pence rate for the distance between 300 and 400 miles. The entire has then travelled on the by-boat service to Guernsey, which was an additional 2pence, making a total of 1 shilling and 1 penny. The entire was addressed to the forwarding agent, Robillard at Weymouth, who sometime between 1803 and 1806 started a by-boat service to Guernsey on Wednesdays. Money letters are the precursor to registered mail. This item from Mould contained £8 in banknotes, covering a debt, costs and postage. The mileage distance from the mark has been erased. Between 1803 and 1815, the mileage was set at 206 miles, and from 1815 to 1831 at 205. The original rate has been erased and changed to 3 shillings and 4pence. Money letters are invariably prepaid and were not supposed to be used for sending banknotes. At 2 times the double 1 shilling 8pence rate, i.e. 3 shillings and 4pence, for the distance between 120 and 170 miles. This entire was sent free under the privilege afforded to members of Parliament. This saved the sender 11p, which would have been the rate for the distance between 170 and 230 miles. An entire from Merthyr Tydfil to Abergavenny was rated at 5p for the distance between 15 and 20 miles. I thought that I should include this as I used to go into Cardiff Dock to discharge petroleum products. There was always coal dust in the air, and going ashore meant avoiding getting covered in coal residue. This entire from Barlow to Ludlow rated at 7p, as in March 1805, all postal rates up to 300 miles were increased by 1p. Tanny Bulk is in the heart of the Snowdonia National Park. This entire was sent via Barmouth, nearly 20 miles away, before continuing to Oswestry. The nice thing about this is the sheet of paper is crested and gold-edged, written by Sir Robert Vaughan, and it references a loan at the rate of £4 10s per cent per annum. An entire rated 5p for the distance between 15 and 30 miles. In 1826, the distance to London was changed from 191 to 179 miles. So this is the first type of the mileage mark for Montgomery. This entire was written at Bury Rectory and rated 1p for the local Welsh penny post service and 1 shilling for the distance between 230 and 300 miles to London. The entire was checked by an inspector, probably to see whether it contained an enclosure, who applied his red star-shaped mark. The entire was then charged an additional 2p for forwarding from London Main Post Office to Richmond. Bury is a small village close to Brooks, which is a very small hamlet where my mother was born. This is the earliest Welsh postal history item that I currently have. Sent in 1714, it is rated at 4p under the first Post Office Act after the union of the Scottish and English Parliaments in 1707. This set the rates at 3p for under 80 miles and 4p for over 80 miles, with 6p the rate to Scotland. This has been sent from Haverfordwest, and if you note the spelling error, which is Haverfordwest, to Guernsey. This entire is annotated per Weymouth packet, rated at 1 shilling for the distance of 252 miles via Brecon and 2d for the by-boat service from Weymouth to Guernsey. This 1792 entire from Pennybont to London is addressed to the Secretary of the Governor of the Queen Anne's Bounty. The 6d rate is for the distance over 150 miles. The Queen Anne's Bounty was a scheme established in 1704 to augment the income of poorer clergy. I have to say there are plenty of letters from Wales requesting assistance. This is a political letter rated at 9d for the distance between 80 and 120 miles, with a strike of the Radnor 164 mileage mark. Note that it is annotated to be opened immediately, RR. The inside has a political poem. And those of you who are good at your music, it's to the tune of "The Noble Race was Shenkin of the line of Owen Tudor. Of a worthy race is Lewis of the line of Edward Percy. This truth is plain, you may maintain, and nothing take on hearsay. Price is a queerish fellow, in his neck vein we've breathed him, though sometimes rash he stints his cash, that old black Dick bequeathed him. Come up and poll for Lewis, for he'll stir up the county, and full and rapid as the Wye shall largely flow his bounty. Your borough then shall prosper, as well as good Montgomery, bring up a score of plumpers more, and mind not Price's flummery. Well, I did this the other day in the practice, and Mark very kindly sent me some information that Richard Price was first elected an MP in 1799, and in fact he was MP till 1818. But Percival Lewis tried to, who this poem was about, wanted to replace him. But in the 1812 election, Price polled 154 votes and Lewis only 38. So Price kept his seat. Thank you, Mark. Now this one has been sent from London to Holt at the 6d rate for a distance above 80 miles. At first it was sent to Denby, receiving the town mark with manuscript missent to. It was then sent to Mould, where it again received the town mark and manuscript missent to. At this point, someone in the post office has annotated the entire Holt is near Wrexham. The sender of the entire made an error with the addresses, as they addressed the entire to Holt near Mould, Denby. Now this entire is from Austin Friars to Aberglasney, rated at 1 shilling for the distance between 230 and 300 miles. It received the missent to Carmarthen mark, used 1 year later than recorded by Wilcox. This is a wrapper sent from Calcutta to Aberglasney, with strikes of missent to Salisbury and missent to Birmingham. You could perhaps excuse the previous slide being missent, but this wrapper is clearly addressed to South Wales. This is the earliest known Welsh inland registered letter sent from Barlet to Aberystwyth, annotated registered letter in red ink and paid at 1 shilling and sixpence, the standard 1 shilling registration fee and 6p postage. Registration was introduced on the 6th of January 1841. This wrapper was sent from Kinsale in Ireland to Exeter and routed via the Waterford to Milford route across the Irish Sea, as this was quicker than via Holyhead. Rated at 1 shilling and threepence, this included 2p for the Irish Sea crossing. On the 21st of June 1836, an Act of Parliament was passed granting additional rate of postage on letters between Great Britain and Ireland by way of Milford and Waterford. The additional rate was a halfpenny road tax for the maintenance of the Hobbs Point track. So this OHMS entire is rated 1 shilling and threepence halfpenny. I bought this item in the Hugh Wood sale, as it was the only pre-stamp item he had going from Jamaica to Wales. And as he had 2 actual huge sale catalogues, I thought it was probably going to be rather scarce, or a scarce destination anyway, from Jamaica. It's come in by the Montague packet and has the Jamaica F, which was put on at Falmouth on arrival. I'm now going to show a few Welsh ship letter markings. So this first one is from the Codrington correspondence and shows a rare example of a town mark used as a ship letter mark. The letter was carried on the Greyhound, which was a 20-gun 6th rate ship. And this is the earliest recorded Welsh ship letter. I recently purchased this 1767 entire from the Tudway correspondence. It was amongst several discovered that had not been seen previously and thus not recorded in the listing of Tudway letters by Mary Gledhill. This is the clearest example of the now 4 recorded examples of this strike. This entire from Barbados to London, annotated via Bristol, addressed to Alexander Gordon in his absence to the James Gordon Coffee House. Jamaica coffee houses were where subscribers, i.e. the merchants, assembled for business purposes, dealing with West Indies and the Madeira trade. And as you'll see, this had the previous best known strike of the Haverfordwest ship letter mark. Now, this is a 1788 entire from the Tudway correspondence. It's the only example from this correspondence to land at Holyhead and receive this ship letter strike, 3 years earlier than previously recorded. This entire was sent during the final British occupation of Grenada, as the French had restored the island to the English at the Treaty of Versailles on the 3rd of September 1783. It was carried by private ship and has a lovely strike of the Robertson Type S1 Beaumaris ship letter, known used between 1765 and 1789. This 1806 entire from Jamaica shows the earliest known combination of a ship letter used in conjunction with the Milford 277 mileage mark. This entire was most likely carried on the Carmarthen and was landed at the Milford Haven Lazarette, where the vessel was quarantined. An 1814 entire, again from the Tudway correspondence, showing one of only 2 recorded ship letter Milford strikes in red. Robertson records the strike in blue in 1860 and not earlier. Wilcox states the strike between 1814 and 1850. This is an entire is from Calcutta going to New Haven, Edinburgh, was landed at Milford and received the step type Milford ship letter strike. The entire should have been struck with the India letter mark, as this attracted a lesser charge. This is an example of the ship letter Milford in blue, as mentioned 2 slides ago. And this one's from Rio de Janeiro to Rothschilds, the bankers in London. Now moved on to a couple of Mulreadys. So this is an 1841 Mulready envelope. This one's stereo A220 from Fishguard to Swansea, with a nice strike in yellow of the scarce Fishguard penny post. The red Maltese cross was correctly struck over Britannia at Haverfordwest, the post town. Now this is the 1841 Mulready envelope, stereo A78 from Booth to London, and this time cancelled with a black Maltese cross. The colour of the Maltese cross cancellations was changed from red to black to prevent reuse, as creosote was discovered to remove red postmarks. And for those of you who like seeing adhesives, I'll conclude with some slides showing these. So this is a penny black on entire dated the 4th of January 1841 from Llanrhys to Liverpool, paying the penny post rate using it when the sixpenny adhesives was introduced from 6th of May 1840. The Llanrhys strike in magenta is scarce, as normally seen in black. And those of you who remember London 2022, Howard Hughes had one of these in his large gold medal exhibit. This entire from Aberystwyth, addressed locally to Llanellar, which is only 2.5 miles from Aberystwyth, is dated the 19th of April 1841, has 2 single plate 5 penny blacks, paying the rate for over half an ounce but less than 1 ounce. Both adhesives cancelled as per regulations, with individual strikes of the Maltese cross. This is a plate 3 twopenny blue from Llandovery on an envelope from entire from Llandovery to Aberystwyth, paying the rate for between a half an ounce and 1 ounce, cancelled with a black Maltese cross. And this item actually routed via Llandovery and Lampeter. This entire has a pair of plate 2 twopenny blues from Mahuntlith to Welshpool, and the undated Mahuntlith circle hand stamp was issued on the 6th of May 1841. Now, the late Reggie Edmonston displayed Cayman Islands at Devonshire Place quite a few years ago, before I was a member, and he also collected Welsh postal history. So I'm following in his footsteps, so to speak. That's the end of my presentation. I'd like to thank you very much for joining me today on my journey around early Welsh postal history.
Well, thank you, James. And I've been looking out for some questions for you, James. And because you very kindly left things on the screen long enough for us all to study the images very, very well, I don't see any questions. I think all the questions that people would have had, you've answered effectively by your explanation and by a dint of showing us what's on those covers. So actually, a late question just came in, which is great. No, it's always good.
I sent you a question. It said no questions.
Thank you, Abhishek. Abhishek Bawalka in India has got a question. Oh, yes. At one point, James, you mentioned. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. What Abhishek's question is one that I think Mike and I also discussed the other day. Abhishek noted that you have a cover that has a mileage mark of 188 miles, but the slide says 5p paid for 15 to 20 miles. Well, I think Abhishek's just trying to understand that the difference there between a mileage mark and the rate. Would you like to just explain that?
Yeah, as I think I did point out, was the mileage mark is from the place that the item was put in the post town, to London. So the mileage mark is the mileage to London, not if it was somewhere local. So if it was in the local area, it wouldn't necessarily need to go via London and then all the way back again.
Yeah, I think that's what it. Yeah, absolutely. That it would certainly slow it down if it had to go all the way to London to then go back to Wales again. Yeah. Ian Gregg, on the subject of distances, actually, Ian Gregg asks, why were the distance changes made? Was it as new roads were built?
I think it was just due to bad measurement. I'm not sure they're necessarily new roads, just bad measurement.
That's certainly my understanding of it, that that some of the mileages were actually estimated rather than measured previously. Some of them were measured. And when someone actually got round to measuring them all accurately and, you know, improving the quality of the surveying, that was when they realized that some of the mileage marks were woefully inadequate.
It was a chap called Carey who was employed by the post office to measure the routes accurately, who subsequently produced Carey's roads, which were the sort of IA road atlas of the day.
Yeah, Malcolm, but there was Patterson's roads as well with different.
Patterson's roads were subsequent to Carey.
Yeah,
Carey did the original surveys, so they were the first Careys are much earlier than Patterson's. But Patterson carried on. I think he took over basically.
Okay, James, Abhishek, thank you, Malcolm, by the way, for that detail. Abhishek has followed up with a little question, comment and question really about the Calcutta letter. Let me just make sure that I can read it clearly because I don't want to read it out wrong. Yeah, so he said that the Calcutta letter should have paid 4p India letter rate. He says he'll be happy to check that because as per Tabiat's book, the captain's gratuity never figured in the rate calculation. Apparently this was a myth perpetuated by Robertson. So yeah, there's some questions over how the Calcutta letter was rated.
Right, 2 and 4. If looking at the actual item itself,
Yeah.
I haven't got the thing on the screen at the moment, but 2 and 4.
Yeah.
From what I understand, was the post office went and took the money for the ship fee for what would have been paid the captain, if you like. They claimed the money back. That makes
Okay.
any sense at all.
Yeah. But I know you mentioned.
Thank you, check.
Yeah. But well, as you mentioned, James, the India letter rate was less than one of the other rates that was mentioned, one of the other ship letter rates.
Yes, they should have. It should have been classed because it came from India as an Indian ship letter, and it wasn't. So therefore, it was more expensive because India letters were cheaper.
Yes. Yeah. Winston Williams has written, I think you showed a penny post item sent free that was re-rated with no charge for the penny post. He thought penny posts were charged for items that had the free privilege.
Did he say which slide it was?
Oh, well, wasn't there one where there was a free mark applied? Because would that be the one to Chelsea?
Hold on a second, just looking. Okay. I've got the one, to the Chelsea Hospital with a free mark. Yes.
I think that must be. Yes, Winston. It was fairly early on, wasn't it? Yes, James. It was because that was one of the earlier slides. Was the one to Chelsea? Yeah.
Yes, which had the 1 on, and the 1 had been crossed through. Yeah, that was it, from Llangefni to Chelsea Hospital, sent free with 1 crossed through. I don't know why that would be, but they down as being charged a penny, and they crossed the penny through.
Is that because there's a subsequent charge of 2pence?
It could have been they crossed through to that point, or it could have been that once it had done the Bangor penny post part, they crossed that out because it was then going free the rest of the way till it got to London. Yeah, because I remember, Malcolm, you told me about the TP rate thing in London when we talked the other day.
Yeah, that was standard even for free letters.
Yeah,
it would have either been one end or the other. It might well have been in London, just to ensure that it was clear that the only charge remaining was the 2penny post charge.
Okay, good. Chris Hitchin has a question with regard to the registered cover that was a shilling and sixpence in 1841.
Yes, yeah.
So I think you said the registration fee was a shilling. The sixpence, Chris's question is, how is the sixpence postage made up? Is that because the item was heavy?
Can I say on that pass at the minute unless I can find it? I'm not sure. What was it? I can't see it. Oh, there we are. No, I've got it. The notes I've got say it was a rate mark of a shilling changed to 1 and 6 because the standard registration was 6pence. Was a shilling with 6pence for the postage. So the postage rate was 6pence. It might well have been a heavy item.
Yeah, that certainly would seem a logical explanation. Okay. Abhishek says he'll get in contact with you, James, about carry and distance calculations. All right, he'll contact you separately on that.
That's fine, thank you. Thanks, Abhishek.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you, Abhishek and Winston and Chris for your questions, and Ian as well. I mean, obviously, Ian, your question stimulated all those discussions about distance changes. So thank you all for your questions. I think, Mike, that was the final question. I'd like to hand over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks, James. A very well structured display with your characteristic pauses so we can actually appreciate what's on the screen. Very good. Some marvellous covers and entires with very high quality markings. I mean, we went through all the Welsh counties represented from Anglesey to Radnorshire. You had separate sections on missent and registered mail, which led on to my own personal favourites, which are ship letters with very interesting origins. After a brief dalliance with the Mulreadys, you concluded with a nice section on penny blacks and twopenny blues. So what more can one ask? So thank you very much for your research, your presentation, and your thoroughness. So I actually think at this point, I thought I was going to do the presentation, but I think our President Peter Coburn has joined us. So Peter, if you are there, perhaps you'd like
Hello.
to say something.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Well, here I am, courtesy of Starbucks. And it's very, very good that I was able to see the vast majority of your show, which was extremely interesting. I particularly like the ship letters too, although of course I'm a bit of a Philistine because it's the one with the stamps on that really interests me. But it's a great idea and very good idea to give us a bit of time to see what's going on the slides. Some presentations you get 55 slides in 22 minutes and you might as well be somewhere else really, but thank you very much indeed. I think you've done a terrific job, James. Of course, next time I send a letter, I shall certainly be consigning it through Captain Podger because his gratuity is only tuppence, which I think is a great idea. So thank you very much, James. Thank you, Mike, for standing in. Thank you, Mark, for running the show. And a very, very happy afternoon to you all. Now, it's my pleasure to present you with a certificate electronically. And if Mark would very kindly put that on the screen, I present it to you, James, with grateful thanks.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Mike. Very kind words. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Right. Michael.
Yes, I think that will conclude the formal part of the meeting. So you can stop recording, I think, if you wish.